This is Marco Reus.
This is Shinji Kagawa.
This is Nuri Sahin.
Hello, this is Jadon Sancho.
And you're listening to the Yellowwallpod podcast.
Hello and welcome to episode 327 of the Yellowwallpod. I'm your host Stefan Butzko, and today we will talk about Dortmund's 6-1 shellacking of SC Paderborn. We will preview Saturday's evening game against Hertha Berlin, and Felix Haselsteiner from the Süddeutsche Zeitung joins us to shed some light on FC Salzburg's Jesse Marsch, the latest coach who has been linked to Dortmund and to succeed Lucien Favre, potentially. For all that and more, joins me Matthias Zug. Hello, Matthias. How are you doing?
Schmelleeee. I'm doing well, Stefan. How are you doing?
Well, I'm doing excellent because this episode is sponsored by the Borussia Dortmund Fan Club London and by Jordan Hunt, who pledged $10 to our Patreon in celebration of Marcel Schmelzer's first league goal since 2013 against FC Nürnberg. And to celebrate that, I have a little sound clip. So if you want to sponsor an episode, go to patreon.com/theyellowwall for more information. And Matthias, it's time to dive right in. I love it. So this is going to be played like eight more times. Probably, but no, it was a 6-1 win. I think we all got our predictions wrong, as Brooke BVB noted, since, Dortmund scored 6 instead of 4. I think I was the closest with a 4-0 margin. I think you had a 3-goal margin, Matthias, so explain yourself.
I was right. I would have been right if Marcel Schmelzer hadn't come on and bestowed his gloriousness to this match and ruined my scoreline prediction. Damn it! I even had the tweet ready. Hey Stefan, I got a scoreline prediction right, and then I had to delete it for the right reasons, which is always nice. But no, I mean, we got it wrong. But if you're going to get it wrong, you may as well get it wrong like that. And so happy for Marcel Schmelzer. Everyone was happy for him. Mats Hummels was happy for him. Reus probably was freaking out, and Favre and all of us, of course. And just the look on Marcel Schmelzer's face was priceless. So really good, and it made me even forget some of the bad from this match for a moment. Yeah,
for a moment, but not for too long, because very shortly after the game, I reminded you that you had a little rant coming up, already scheduled by the podcast host, but you gladly obliged, so we'll hear from that later. But Matthias, maybe talk a little bit about the first half, which was pretty darn uneventful, and in German we would say Steine kloppen, and I think Lucien Favre said after the game at the news conference that basically the first half was all about tiring out good old Paderborn. But as I would note, the big positive is that Dortmund were not 3-0 down by the break.
No, that's true. The negative is they should have been up 3-0 by the break, or 2-0 at least. I mean, there were two huge chances. One just before halftime where I still don't know how those weren't goals. And there were a few more in the second half. And I thought it really interesting. You don't see an emotional reaction from Lucien Favre too often in press conferences. But afterwards in the press conference, some journalists made the statement of, well, given how atrociously bad the first half was from Dortmund, and that statement was read out, and you could just see the flash of irritation and anger on Lucien Favre's face. And I have to agree with him. Dortmund didn't play horrible in the first half. Paderborn played actually really, really well. They had a couple of chances, but I would say them missing the chances that they had was way more predictable than Dortmund missing the clear-cut chances that they had. But Paderborn did well. They played very Wolfsburg-esque in their 4-4-2 type setup and ran a lot, tried really hard. You could, though, see the very low quality in the squad, and that this is a different Dortmund side than from the 3-0 back in November in terms of confidence and just keep on going and keep on going and keep on going, and eventually, they just broke them down, and Paderborn just had nothing left, and Dortmund still had plenty left. And even in the first half, there were probably 10-15 minutes where Paderborn played pretty well and kept Dortmund kind of in the middle of the pitch. But for the most part, Dortmund just dominated and suffocated Paderborn into their half. And I always felt like it's going to happen, but it may not be 4 goals. And I was right. It was not 4 goals.
I don't mean any disrespect, but Paderborn, I think, overall were almost as bad as Schalke are. Not that bad, but they weren't good. Let's put it this way. I mean, it was good for them as well as they, the Etappen-Sieg or whatever you call it, that they managed to go into the locker room with 0 goals on the scoreboard. You can mark this as a success, but if you're that far down on the table, and I think it's pretty hopeless for them at this point, then even if you play against Dortmund, you obviously need a win. And I think overall it's very encouraging that Dortmund went to Paderborn and just really hammered them, because Bayern Munich, I think, won there 3-2 or 4-2, but that game was more interesting than it probably should have been. So, you can slip up against Paderborn, as Dortmund themselves have shown earlier this season. And so it was very good that in the back of their minds they probably had that 3-3 result. And obviously it also helps when you have a fast center back like Manuel Akanji, who especially in the first 5 to 10 minutes had a couple of sprint duels against Streli Mamba. But he dealt with that very, very easily. And I remember the 3-0 halftime score against Paderborn in the Hinrunde. Dortmund just got outpaced. I think the back line, the back three there was Piszczek, Hummels and Weigl, and none of them has any sort of pace. So that sort of was the Achilles heel in that game. And if you have Akanji, things tend to work out better if you need pace in defense. So that was very positive. Obviously, also very positive then how Dortmund started or opened the scoring. I think it was Emre Can who made a run behind Paderborn's backline, which is rare, but it happened. And Zingerle spilled the ball a little bit for Torgan Hazard to tap in, who was playing in the wake of the injured Erling Haaland, who obviously clattered into the referee during the Bayern game to add insult to injury, and add injury also because he has an injured knee now and may also miss for the Hertha game, but more about that later. So that I think was very positive. And then obviously we might as well talk about it now in the context of both Sancho and Hakimi, because Sancho literally scored 3 minutes later after a nice assist by Julian Brandt. And then obviously he, I think he completely pulled his shirt off and revealed justice for George Floyd on his undershirt, and Achraf Hakimi later had a similar celebration. He just lifted his shirt so he didn't get a yellow booking, and I think that was very important. And for me personally, I always appreciated when players of Borussia Dortmund are outspoken, opinionated, and make political statements, especially when it's for such an important case as this is now, which really, has global implications, I think. I mean, there are protests not just in the United States, but solidarity is being shown all over the world right now. So, it's very good to see them do that. And obviously, police violence and racial profiling in the United States is a big issue. And has been an issue for basically forever, and especially with the NFL and the whole Kaepernick thing, that the United States had a lot of trouble in dealing with these issues and how to articulate them and how to protest against it and all that. So it's very positive to see that players from the Bundesliga, I mean, it was also Marcus Thuram and Weston McKennie who made similar gestures. Matthias, I'll just invite you to add to that.
Yeah, so again, I applaud not just the players for doing it, but I also think it was the right decision from both FIFA as well as the DFB to basically say, there's not going to be any disciplinary action taken against the players for making a statement like this. I think this isn't necessarily a political statement. No one's making a statement for a political candidate or anything like this. This is a human statement of solidarity and wanting, beyond just justice, but reform and people to have a dialogue and confront themselves with their own prejudices, no matter in which direction that goes. And as such, it can only be applauded. Naturally, there are plenty of people who then say things like athletes should just stick to sports. And Stefan, I will warn you here, you can make a marker for it, whether you want to bleep it or put an expletive notation for this episode. But if the opinion is that athletes should just stick to sports and shut up, then you can go fuck yourself. Because that is just the dumbest thing in a democratic society that any moron can ever utter. What you're actually saying is, don't have an opinion if it's different from mine. And in this case, with the George Floyd, let's call it protest or solidarity declaration, what you're also saying is, you're a racist. So congratulations, you scumbag. But beyond that, it's the same as if you would go to an accountant and say, don't have an opinion, just stick to the numbers. That's bullshit. Everyone is entitled to an opinion. Whether you agree with it or not is completely irrelevant. And they should be allowed to express that democratic right in whatever form or fashion that they choose to. And the way Jadon Sancho, Hakimi, and plenty of others did it is the right way to do it. And should be applauded and is applauded. And everything that's happened since then, it's the same way. But again, people are entitled to express their opinions, whether you or I, Stefan, or anybody else agrees or disagrees with it. It is their right to do so. And to tell them to stay in their lane and just do their job, well, that's just stupid. I'm sorry. So I applaud Jadon Sancho, Weston McKennie, who did the only good thing Schalke has done in a long time. Needless to say, they screwed up yesterday big time. Bunch of pricks. And so... No, I think it's great, and I hope it continues. And the interesting thing is even the DFB said that maybe there will be more latitude given in future for players to be allowed to make declarations like this without facing any form of punishment. It was also great to see that Michael Zorc in the press conference, along with Lucien Favre, said they're 100% behind Jadon Sancho and Achraf Hakimi, and that they hope that they continue to do that and make those statements and make those opinions known. And Dortmund, I have to say, to their credit as well, like during the match and right after the match, they didn't stop. I mean, they immediately retweeted and tweeted the images with hashtag justice for George Floyd and hashtag Black Lives Matter, all that kind of stuff. So the club made the right statement right away. I mean, they didn't even hesitate and think if there's any backlash, because if there's backlash for it, well, honestly, Stefan, who needs racist fans anyway?
Yeah, I don't. That's for sure. And I mean, we really have to acknowledge that whether we live in the United States or in Germany, and I think Germany in for many people is considered not that racist, but I think that's quite wrong. It's still also an unjust society, and racial profiling by the police also happens in Germany and in other European countries. So I don't think there's any place in the world that's completely non-racist. So I think the struggle against xenophobia is a struggle of everyone's lifetime, basically, because I don't think any society will ever get 100% right. So, and I mean, you can see how Dortmund players really grapple with that. Obviously, even more so players of color. You can see the Twitter feed of Dan-Axel who's just seriously appalled by the police violence, which is clearly documented on videos that you can see on Twitter in so many ways. And obviously, in the United States, we use that word freedom a lot. And obviously in Germany, I like the term Freiheit as well. And I think, to live free in many ways means to live a worry-free life. And if you have to worry about, random gun violence or random attacks by the law enforcement, those who want to protect you, or I don't know, just people calling the police on you, all that kind of stuff, that's not what the essence of freedom is. And if you always have to worry about something in the back of your head, that's just not freedom, as I said. So we all have to make an effort to guarantee that every person in a democratic society or every person in general can live freely and express themselves. So I think that's very important. And a very good step. I think Dortmund today tweeted a picture of all Dortmund players taking a knee in a heart shape. I think that's a good sign. I think symbolism is important in situations like that, and just to show that you are, aware of what is going on. And I hope that helps. So Matthias, I don't know how we're going to segue now into any penalty calls.
Well, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, and in this case also justice. And obviously this is a justice that doesn't matter as much as the other one, which is more societal and stuff like that. And I agree with you. And, Dan-Axel obviously horrified by it and struggling with it. He comes obviously from a country in France that also has its massive issues when it comes to this type of stuff. And so it's something that touches all of us, especially as Europe has become more multicultural in the last 20, 30 years, that we can't turn a blind eye to ever. So now, as far as on the pitch justice, so Emre Can, of course, see, here's the funny thing. So I was watching it. I saw him, fly in for the block. I just see it as hitting him in the chest. And I take a sip of my coffee, and my son asks me something. I turn over, and all of a sudden I see Emre Can yelling at the ref. I'm like, wait, what's going on? And there's a penalty, and I asked my son if he would briefly leave the room because I had to get something off my chest. And the fact that, so what compounds this horrendously bad call from a horrendously bad day at the office for the referee was the fact that obviously Dortmund did not get a penalty even reviewed from Jerome Boateng clearly extending his arm to block a shot that would have gone into the bottom of the net with Bayern and Dortmund match. But no, Emre Can kept the arm as close to his body as he could while flying in to block it, and most of the ball hit his chest, his body, and it was more incidental. There was no movement towards or specifically targeting the ball with your arm, unlike what Jerome Boateng did. This was 100% never a penalty. And Boateng was 100% a penalty. But the bigger issue for me is not even the call or no call. It's that it didn't even get another glance in VAR from the referee. And Stefan, I would like you to explain to my emotional state as to how or why this did or did not happen.
This is a whole conspiracy concocted by Bill Gates and George Soros. No, I honestly don't know why VAR is leaving Dortmund in a lurch yet again. I mean, if we look at the end result, it didn't matter, but for a funny 20 seconds or so, it felt like, oh no, we really don't need this. No, but honestly, I think it's Dortmund fans have all right to be a bit outraged and miffed or whatever you want to call it by that, because it's really freaking annoying that such a momentous call, a season-defining call, I think, in the Bayern game didn't get called, and then, you know, I think Matthias Jöllenbeck was the video assistant referee in the Paderborn game, brings out his big salt shaker and screws off the lid so he can get the biggest, baddest grain of salt that's in his salt shaker and rub it directly into Dortmund's open wound. And it's just appalling, and the Bundesliga needs to do a much better job and not so blatantly favor Bayern any frickin' way they can. Jesus effing Christ.
Oh, it's amazing. So I'm a proponent of VAR. I have always been an outspoken proponent. But if this is what happens, why even have it? Because this was a clear situation that needed a review, just like the Bayern match. And at least here there was a pause in the situation, whereas with Bayern it was like, nah, not even going to bother with looking at it, because, and I know last episode, we said, oh, there's no conspiracy theory. We just, that's all silliness. Well, it sure feels like Juventus bought the title kind of a situation as a Serie A fan, but it's so egregious, and the beauty of it is, it's not even Dortmund fans that freaked out over this, or exclusively. Every podcast, every YouTube show, they were all like, are you kidding me with this in those two situations? Because if there's one thing I've always said, and I'm very harsh on referees, always have been, whether when I was playing, coaching, or as a fan or a commentator. But even if you're shitty at your job, at least be it consistently. And it absolutely baffles me as how that can happen, especially because VAR is supposed to be devoid of the emotion of the situation and apply a consistent rule usage across every match, regardless of situation. And I think we can all agree that that's not the case. And they asked Lucien Favre again after the match. They were like, so, do you understand the handball rule at all anymore? And he's like, nope. And I think we can all agree with that big fat nope.
Yeah, I think we can. So, yeah, also, I think we can move on from that subject, because all I have left at this point are swear words, and that's not going to help anyone. So let's talk about the final 10 minutes, where, among others, Marcel Schmelzer and Giovanni Reina got subbed on. And as we all know, Marcel Schmelzer grabbed an assist and a goal. So, that obviously was pretty amazing. But what also happened, and we've been asked to talk about him, is that Matteo Morey got his first couple of minutes on the football field, and I think he also grabbed an assist for Jadon Sancho at the end in that counter-attack. And obviously, he picked up the pre-assist for Marcel Schmelzer's goal. And so he had a lively little game in the couple of minutes he had. Your thoughts on that absolutely too small sample size of football we got from Matteo Morey?
Well, it's good to know that he's alive. He exists. And
actually,
I mean, it's not
kick a ball.
Yeah, it's kind of like with Balerdi when he started getting subbed on. It's like, oh, he's here. The Argentinian full international gets to have a cameo for Dortmund. No, I mean, it's the right sign at the right time. It's good to see to come on and get some time. It's way too small of a sample size of the match that was done against an opponent that was done and bad to really say much. I mean, at that point, it was a training match.
Yeah, I could have looked good in these 5 minutes of garbage time.
Yes,
For
without
all
a
the air
doubt.
I have.
But, for me, it's a bigger deal than what Marcel Schmelzer did, just because he's, if we go way back to when Löw basically said he's never going to play with me, even though he was one of the better left backs in Germany at the time, and then just, age catching up with him, form dipping more and more, and then obviously the last arguably 3 years he's played little to no role for Dortmund. To have that situation, even if it was garbage time against a garbage opponent that had just fallen to pieces, it doesn't matter. It's great for him. So that means more to me than Morey coming on. But it was nice to see that, Favre didn't completely forget the Barcelona player that came to Dortmund.
Yeah, it's absolutely correct. With Schmelzer was also kind of funny because I felt like you could see that he really wanted to score when he assisted for Achraf Hakimi. I think he expected more of a give and go type of play, but Hakimi scored it directly. And from the body language, Schmelzer wasn't like the Erling Haaland assist celebration or whatever. It was more like, I wanted the ball back and score it myself. But yeah, so it was good that he. Was it over Uwe Hünemeyer he scored? Because in that whole celebration pile, one Paderborn defender was still laying on Schmelzer while the rest of the team was too excited to celebrate with Schmelzer than to make way for that poor guy.
Yeah, I don't even remember. I was so caught up in the moment that I don't 100% remember. It was just cool. So for me, that's the depth of my analysis when it comes to that.
Yeah, no, we're going to segue into the Hertha match with this break track. So, that I think puts a lid on that 6-1 win. Dortmund now still in second place, and I think everyone else pretty much won too. So the pressure keeps mounting, and what we did not mention in the Paderborn segment, but will now, is that Mats Hummels obviously finally got his 5th yellow card, and I don't know if I've ever issued a correction from my Bayern preview where I put everyone into a panic that, actually in the game before the Bayern game, I think there was the Wolfsburg game, that Mats Hummels was on 4 yellow cards. That was wrong. He had 4 yellow cards in all competitions, and he had 3 in the Bundesliga, but since then he managed to add 2 more. That means he's now suspended for that Hertha game. And Matthias, before anything else, does that mean Emre Can will play as a center back in an attempt to replace Hummels? And I think I'm not giving away too much by saying that Dortmund have struggled in the past when they had to replace Hummels, like the Wolfsburg match.
Yeah, and to quote Lucien Favre, I do not know. It's he was asked with Hummels being out, are you going to have to change your formation? He said, we'll have to see. Well, Emre Can could play in central defense. Is he going to play in central defense? I don't know, but he could play there. He could play in midfield. I don't know. Like Lucien Favre is going to tell everybody, this is the formation we're going to go with. I think, it would be a poor choice to go away from this formation and go back to the 4-2-3-1, because then you're basically saying your center back pairing is Piszczek and Akanji. And I love the 2 guys, but I just feel like the calming presence from Mats Hummels between them elevates their play significantly. I mean, there's no denying that Akanji got way better once they started playing the back 3. Now, Emre Can is obviously not Mats Hummels. Nobody in the Bundesliga is. He's definitely not as calm under pressure as Mats Hummels, but he's still very good, very capable. He's played those types of roles before. I think, given a full week of practice to focus on that and the tactical concepts behind it, especially with Hummels being there and being able to work with him, because it's not like Hummels is injured, so he'll be part of practice. in those situations. I think that'll prepare Emre Can for that role better. And as such, my prediction would be Can in the middle of the three, and then Witsel and Delaney ahead of him in that kind of double pivot. Or Delaney and Brandt, Witsel and Brandt, even though Delaney's actually played really well since coming back from the Corona break, if that's what we're calling it. So that's what I believe will probably happen. And I think you need to, against a resurgent Hertha side, I think a 4-2-3-1 with Akanji and Piszczek as your center back pairing is asking for yet another beautiful Bruno win.
Yeah, I mean, we could have talked about the title race all we wanted, but we always knew that this game was going to be an automatic loss against Bruno Labbadia, obviously. So, but I think you're right. It's kind of sad that Mahmoud Dahoud picked up an injury and will now miss for the rest of the season, because he just found some groove. So I think we will, and against Hertha of all teams, have a double pivot again of Delaney and Witsel. So I assume that this is going to be a very industrious performance overall. Who knows, maybe they'll surprise me, but if you have Can in behind that sort of triangle, and then you have Akanji and Piszczek on the sides, I don't know how well Dortmund will do in their build-up play, and whether they will have a good positional play, especially if you go up against, Darida, Grujic and Skjelbred. That sounds to me like, a very industrious and very scrappy afternoon at the Westfalenstadion, or rather evening, since it's the Topspiel. So, I think up top we will see Thorgan Hazard again replacing Erling Haaland if he's not fit, and I think he won't be. I think it's like a game time decision, right? I haven't seen the press conference yet, but you have.
He got asked about it, and basically no real comment to it. It's not decided yet, but I think I'd be surprised if Haaland starts. I think he may be on the bench. But a start, I wouldn't start him. I wouldn't risk him right now. You still have a number of matches ahead of you. And given how well that Brandt, Sancho, Hazard constantly rotating triangle worked against an industrious Paderborn side, I think you could just stick with that.
Yeah, I think so too. Especially when you have Guerrero and Hakimi to assist from the wings. That should help. I mean, this game is probably... I may be wrong, but I feel like a lot of things will, try to be forced through the middle. So, it's also funny because, obviously the Hertha Berlin game, of the Hinrunde is the cornerstone for Lucien Favre's revamp. This is when Dortmund switched to the back three. Obviously didn't finish the game with the back three because somebody got sent off. I'm not entirely sure who it was then, but, Dortmund had to close the game out with just 10 men, and it was sort of a scrappy, really important win in the end. But it's interesting to see how far Dortmund have come since that game, since the, I guess, struggle is right in the Hinrunde, and how much better they are now. And if it weren't for that from that down Bayern game, they almost would have maximum points in the Rückrunde. I think the other loss of points was against Leverkusen. So, Dortmund pretty much performing at their best. And Matthias, I think it's also time to highlight, and I've had this statistic ready already the last time, but I didn't think that Dortmund would score like 8 or 9 goals. But Dortmund are about to write history. I don't know if it will happen against Hertha Berlin or in the next game, but right now they have 80 goals scored. Last season, obviously, they scored 81 across 34 match days. And the all-time record that Dortmund set in 2015-2016 under Thomas Tuchel, if I'm not mistaken, is 82 goals. And I think with 5 games left, it's pretty fair to predict that Dortmund will reach that mark. So that will mean that Lucien Favre will be the coach of Dortmund's best ever Bundesliga attack. I have to say Bundesliga attack because in 73, Dortmund scored 93 goals in the Zweite Bundesliga Nord back then, when they got promoted again to the Bundesliga. So 93 goals then. Maybe Dortmund can pip even that if they have a couple more blowouts. But for a coach where his lack of attacking thought is often, I don't know, criticized and people frown upon Favre for being a too defensive-minded coach or whatever. I think it's time to really highlight that, and in that context, maybe we can also just highlight how darn important Jadon Sancho is for Borussia Dortmund with the amount of goals he has contributed, almost half of that. I mean, it's just crazy. So losing him doesn't matter when, will obviously a massive blow to Dortmund. So Matthias, I don't know how you see it, but I think it's time to just highlight a little bit how attacking Dortmund are actually under Favre and how prolific they have been this season.
Yeah, that's something that tends to get quickly and easily swept under the rug by the haters. Is that, Favre likes a patient, methodical approach. It's not Vollgas Fußball. It's not Klopp style or Klopp style when he was at Dortmund. Klopp style has changed at Liverpool. He's a little more methodical now, and they will see out matches. But the Favre approach is basically, it's kind of like this saying in German, that the constant drop of water will hollow out the rock. It's a very rough translation, but that's kind of the Favre approach. And it works. And then when they lull the opponent to come out a little bit, because they're not a very high-pressing team most of the time, they'll do it situationally, but not for 90 minutes like Jürgen Klopp did, or even Thomas Tuchel. Under Thomas Tuchel, they pressed really high. Let's not even talk about Bosch's crazy high press. Under Favre, it's sitting a bit deeper, which creates the space for those players to be able to run into. And there is, Bayern is really the only other side that's as prolifically dangerous on the break like that as Dortmund. To me, Leipzig isn't really, because you're just talking about Timo Werner in that instance. Gladbach-ish, kind of, but it's a different style. It's really those two sides of Bayern and Dortmund, when they're given space and they can counter, that it's devastating every single time. And what Sancho does is what great players tend to do. I just finally finished The Last Dance. And to me, Michael Jordan was, and forever will be the greatest NBA player of all time. And what transformed him was when he realized he didn't have to take the last shot. I mean, they won 2 NBA final titles with him not taking the last shot. The fact that he has to be accounted for. Sancho is that player now that has to be accounted for. It's like in the NFL when they start double teaming a player, be it a tight end or a wide receiver, somebody's going to be open. And that's what Sancho is creating now as well. And then when Haaland is on the pitch, they got to account for him. So you can't account for 2 players, because that'll then leave Brandt completely open or Hazard completely open. And that's the dynamism that he adds to this side, which makes it so prolific and so dangerous on the break.
Yeah, I can only agree. Now, I think we can shift our focus a little bit on Hertha, even though I'm not too well versed in what's going on at the Hauptstadtklub, because I don't really care that much. But they have been on a pretty good run. The last 5 games they have not lost. Or the last 6 games even. So Hertha are doing rather well. Have played themselves into 9th place. Have 38 points now, and I think right now on the most on-form player they have is Matheus Cunha. So he's probably going to play on the right wing, and is obviously a very fast player. So something Dortmund have to watch out for. But I think this is a game where Labadia will obviously go for pace, because when you play Dortmund, that's what you do. With Dodi Lukebakio, they have another player that Dortmund know very well that has already scored on them. I think, against Düsseldorf in their 2-1 defeat last time. Dortmund were caught on a break, and obviously the veteran Vedat Ibisevic, who I think is their second best goal scorer this season with 5 goals. Luke Bacchio has 6, and Konya has now 5 too. In his 7 games he played for Hertha. So watch out for the Brazilian, I think, who came from RB Leipzig, if I'm not mistaken. But Boyata and Grujic are also players who I like, and I also like Vladimir Darida. It's just the rest of the team which I find bang average. But I think the investments that Hertha have made were okayish, and with that they have a capable team. Obviously, a team that can beat Dortmund, and with Krzysztof Piątek, they also have a striker who can switch it off at any given switch it on at any given moment. But I feel like there's a parallel, not only because he's Polish, to the good old Robert Lewandowski, because I feel like Piątek is the sort of player that has a lot of potential, but just can't show it in the games yet, really. It's more of a Trainingsweltmeister. So, we'll see how that goes. But this is a game where I'm not 100% convinced Dortmund will easily walk away with 3 points, especially not if you're -1 Mats Hummels. So, I'm very cautious and wary of this Hertha team, even though Dortmund have a very good home record against them. I don't know what your thoughts are on Hertha Berlin, but I think they have improved, which they should, given their investment. But also, just Bruno Labbadia, I think, is a bit underrated in the Bundesliga, isn't he?
Oh, absolutely. The Bruno revolution is running, and we can't forget, he actually did a really, really good job at Wolfsburg last season. I think it was just, Wolfsburg trying to be overly ambitious for the hot new commodity in Glasner. And then, there was also just a bit of an issue with Labbadia and Schmatke, but it seems Schmatke tends to rub coaches the wrong way. That's kind of his MO throughout his career as a sporting director. But I agree with you. Everything is there to make for a very intriguing, combative matchup. Mateusz Cunha on the right side facing Guerrero and Akanji. I'm not so worried about. Luka Bacchio does worry me, because we do know of Hakimi's defensive positioning frailties at times, and if you expose Piszczek to that type of pace with no Mats Hummels, it's a little bit of a concern. I think if Mats Hummels was playing, then I would make Dortmund the very clear favorites, to be honest. With Mats Hummels out, it definitely levels the playing field a little bit more. I think Hertha's defense is that bang average you talked about, and obviously on the goalkeeping side, it's below bang average in my opinion. But it's going to be, Labbadia and the way they're going to probably set up and play, they're going to make it very difficult for Dortmund. It's going to be laborious. It's going to be combative. It's going to be fouls. I mean, if it's red card Vedat in there, then who knows? I mean, I would try Emre Can against Vedat Ibisevic. That's going to be so much fun, because if I'm Emre Can, I am in Vedat's ear all the time talking smack to him until he finally does what red card Vedat does and flip out and do something stupid and get sent off. I would absolutely do that. I am not morally above those kind of games. And I think Emre Can is that kind of player who loves that combative nature about it. I forget, there was some kind of match where, he also went toe-to-toe with another player, and afterwards they basically high-fived because it was, good fight kind of a thing. And gosh, that's something that Dortmund needs in a match against Hertha, who have a few of those characters, none more so than Vedat Ibisevic.
Yeah, I feel like Dortmund will concede the obligatory set-piece goal in this game, just because Hertha traditionally are a very dominant team in the air, and Dortmund traditionally are not. So just because of that, that's an easy prediction to make, even though, we've been talking about set-piece goals a lot in the first half of the season on this particular show, and I'm glad that we're not doing this as often anymore, and Dortmund have fixed a very glaring issue. So that's very positive, I guess. But yeah, maybe overall it's time for predictions now. So Matthias, go ahead.
So I'm going to say Dortmund are going to win. They're going to win 2-1. They're going to win it relatively late. It's going to be nervy, combative, and BVB Twitter is going to lose its shit for about 89 minutes of it.
Yeah, it's a very good prediction. I think Dortmund are going to win this 3-2. I assume there's a little bit more drama. Matthias, it's a 7-point difference to Bayern and whatnot, but I still have to ask, if Leverkusen beat Bayern in the game before, will this add any sort of pressure for Dortmund? Do you think that can make them think things about thinking, or do you think that's not going to affect this Dortmund side at all, the result of the Bayern game, if they drop 3 points?
Well, if Bayern lose and Dortmund win, okay, Bayern have Frankfurt in the cup next, I believe, and then Gladbach, if I remember correctly. And Dortmund don't. So obviously, and Gladbach are in a good vein of form. They looked fantastic on the weekend. So given an extra match and playing another difficult opponent, if they lose to Leverkusen, which is absolutely, they could easily lose 2-1 to Leverkusen. They could also beat Leverkusen 8-0, and neither one of those would surprise me. But if they lose, then yes, there is still a chance of something happening. If they win, I just don't see them slipping up enough, knowing that Dortmund also have to play Leipzig still.
And Hoffenheim.
And oh God, Hoffenheim, the ultimate bogey team since Hamburg got relegated. It hinges on Peter Bosz, ironically, in my opinion. If Bosz gets Leverkusen to beat Bayern, then I think the race is kind of back on, at least for a week or two. If they don't drop points, or even I think even a draw, I think it'll be hard after that.
Yeah, I agree, but either way, title race or no title race, it just would be very satisfying to see Bayern lose for once again. Jesus Christ. So, yeah.
Hansi Flick is way too good of a coach. He's way too, it just bothers me.
Yeah, it's just so annoying, isn't it? Anyway, speaking of coaches, we have been asked by @Colin_Barry to talk about Jesse Marsch, and Colin, I came through for you, or rather Felix Haselsteiner did, because that's who I invited to the show to talk about a potential coach, and when we come back, Matthias and I will have our 2 cents. So without any further ado, here's my interview with Felix Haselsteiner. I'm now joined by Felix Haselsteiner, who is an author for the Süddeutsche Zeitung. On Twitter, you can find him @FelixHA18. Welcome to the show, Felix.
Hi, good to be here. Thank you.
And there's a proper reason why I've invited you here, and that is because your expertise lies within FC Salzburg, and the coach for that team right now is Jesse Marsch, who has been linked with Borussia Dortmund recently. Since my expertise on Jesse Marsch is very limited, I thought I would invite you, Felix, here, and tell us a little bit about the coach. So what I do know is that before he joined Salzburg, I think last season he was the assistant manager of Ralf Rangnick at RB Leipzig. If you want to talk a little bit about how he became the Salzburg coach, the stage is yours.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's an obvious connection between Leipzig and Salzburg through Red Bull. But I just think that he really took over this I would say Red Bull school in the way, of finding a way to play very aggressive style football, very offensive football with this pressing tactics. And I think that Ralf Rangnick, who was working with him in Leipzig, was obviously looking for educating him a little on that style of football. And I think he did a very good job at that, because when Jesse Marsch arrived at Salzburg, also in the first weeks, you could really sense that he was understanding the style of the football that has been played there under Marco Rose, who's now working at Gladbach. And he in some way perfected it, but I'm sure we're going to talk about the players that he had, or he was coaching. He was coaching at Salzburg in the first half of the season, which I guess had a big impact. But no, just the way that Jesse Marsch took over the club was very impressive in the way that he was right there from the first day on, understanding how things are working in Salzburg, and so you could sense that he would obviously understood the football very early.
Yeah, before we talk about the tactics, I think from a Dortmund perspective, obviously ever since Jürgen Klopp, a lot of focus goes on the personality of the coach, and Lucien Favre is a very timid guy in comparison to that. How would you describe Jesse Marsch just as a character, and do you think he and his personality would fit to Borussia Dortmund?
Yeah, I totally think they would fit, because what Marsch, he does have this very energetic way of coaching on the sideline. While if you talk to him in interviews, and if you look at him as from a press conference perspective, he's very calm there. He's never losing his pace. He's very American there in a way that he's very polite. Never sort of going out of place or losing his temper in that situations or in those situations. But when he's on the sideline coaching his team, he's extremely passionate. So I can remember a few scenes, where he got yellow cards for being a little too offensive towards the referee. But in general, he's always coaching his team, which I do appreciate for a coach. And I think that's a big, if you look at Jürgen Klopp, that's always been one of my critical points, that he was not always focusing on his team, but he was always talking to the other coach and stuff. So Jesse Marsch is really focused on his team and giving them a lot of energy, talking, also going for and I think that's a parallel to Jürgen Klopp, going, trying to take the audience into her atmosphere, and trying to create the spark that the team needs in some situations. And I think he does a very good job at that, and he has a very passionate way of instructing his team as well. So you can sense that in a way that Salzburg is always very strong in the first 10 minutes of each half, I would say. And that's clearly speaking for the coach in a way that he's talking to them in the right way.
Jesse Marsch went viral when an excerpt of his halftime speech at Liverpool in the Champions League got posted online, and that was very energetic. And if I remember correctly, Salzburg were 3-0 down at the time, and then they came back almost. Made it 3-3, but in the end Liverpool still won 4-3. But there was much made of that. But obviously for us at the Yellowwallpod, at the end it's always more important what happens on the football field rather than just on the sidelines. And I understand that you obviously want to have someone that can build a connection with the fans. I think that's important in the modern football, even if it's not the ultimate quality you need to have as a coach. So you already mentioned his pressing tactics. How exactly would you describe that?
You have to make it. You can't compare to the Salzburg team in the first half of the season with the Salzburg team in the second half of the season, because the first half he had Minamino and Haaland, as those striker figures, and he sort of built it around them with having one who was a good player, but definitely he made him better. And then you had Haaland and Minamino as the free strikers, and they were very aggressive in their pressing, and then they were very good in anticipating longer balls that were played towards them, with Haaland obviously being the fixed point in the middle, and then having the other two guys on the sidelines going wide, and then you always had he had a clear imagination of being super aggressive, especially in the first games he played in the Champions League, where he had this crazy 6-2 win over Genk, and that was incredible. I mean, the football they were playing, they didn't give any space to the opposite team, and I think that was something that you could play with players like Haaland and Minamino, who were quick, who had the pace to be aggressive and then still go for long runs with the ball, and who they had obviously had the fitness too. And the only thing that was an issue at the beginning and still is kind of an issue is that sometimes this aggressiveness, is, I wouldn't say stupid, but he could be, or he should be a little smarter in some phases of the game where the team needs to come back a little, for 15, 20 minutes, make sure that they don't, get another goal in and get pressure from the other team. And that was something that he clearly saw in the first half, or in the first half of the season at Salzburg. And then I think he did a better job at that, connecting or finding out about that. And I asked him in a press conference once if that's something that he wants to develop. And he said, yes, sure, that, with every young team, you start out being very aggressive and with a lot of pressing. And then you need to find out when there are phases of the game where you need to retire a little bit and be a little smarter.
Yeah, I think it's very important. We saw at Dortmund the same learning curve with Jurgen Klopp, definitely, that this team at some point just didn't know when to stop and in the end ran out of energy. And I think, sometimes you just need to have a little bit of that possession and ball retention just to catch a break. So my question really is also, because under Lucien Favre, Borussia Dortmund have perfected that, I guess, in a way that they rarely have before. Maybe under Thomas Tuchel, but I wouldn't even say in the same sense that they are a very possession-heavy team and that they have an excellent positional play right now. If you play a high-octane pressing style, sometimes having the correct positional play in possession is a bit more difficult because you're out of breath, or you are closer to your opponents than you want to be when you were not in possession, and then you have to reposition and to make little adjustments. How is it working for FC Salzburg so far? You just said that sometimes they don't have stints of possession and then they are trying to be very direct. But obviously when you coach Borussia Dortmund, I think by now you can't just try to make an attack out of every ball possession right away. So how do you think Jesse Marsch could adapt that to Borussia Dortmund?
Yeah, I mean, the situation between Salzburg and Dortmund is obviously a big difference. I mean, if you look at Salzburg, they have their league where they're clearly the dominant force and clearly the favorites in almost every game. And therefore, they can play this style without risking too much because they can sort of, count on the opposite team not having the quality to score enough goals to beat them. And then you have these European situations where Salzburg was a small force where they could take a lot of risk and they had nothing to lose. And I think that's the big difference at Dortmund, where Dortmund you see that they clearly, in my opinion, I'm an outsider. I'm not following them on a daily basis like you guys do. But from my perspective, they need to get into this mode where they can win titles again, and therefore I would say that that's a little risky with bringing a coach like Jesse Marsch. I think that he might be able to adapt a sort of more ball focused playing style that is in some way focusing on positional play, but I still think that it's risky in a way that the excellent positional play that Favre has brought in now, I wouldn't necessarily say that would go away, but I think that Jesse Marsch would still go for a little more offensive pressing at the beginning, and therefore it could turn out to be a little risky in terms of, we want to win titles next year and not in 3 or 4 years time. Yeah, so the other thing that you have to consider with Marsch and Dortmund is obviously Haaland, and they've both had a great connection with each other. Though I wouldn't say that Haaland is necessarily a player that is extremely focused on the coach he's having. He's more focused on Mino Raiola and making sure that he has his career plan set out, I think. So I wouldn't necessarily think that just by taking in Marsch for the next 3 or 4 years, you can make sure that Haaland stays for the next 3 or 4 years. So I think that would be kind of an illusion.
Yeah, I think you are hitting the nail absolutely on the head here, because obviously taking a punt, let's say, on a, I think, 46-year-old coach who doesn't have that much experience would obviously be a risk for Dortmund, and really, say a lot about their long-term thinking. Obviously, Julian Nagelsmann was their desired coach, but that never worked out. He is at RB Leipzig now, and I think they have tried to get coaches that have the RB Leipzig or the Red Bull school of thought in them. I think that pattern is clearly there to see. I mean, Peter Bosz was also a similar try, I guess, before they hired Lucien Favre.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, I think you're right. It is obviously a risk. The question is obviously for Dortmund what their brand of football is supposed to be, and we at the Yellowwallpod have put this into question a little bit, because they went from Jürgen Klopp to Tuchel to Bosz to Favre, and there is not really that red fabric that you can find, because they're all very different in their approach to the game. I think that is a good way to stop it, unless you have one final thought on whether it would be a good fit for Dortmund overall.
One final thought, maybe, that Dortmund is still a club that is where it's quite important that you also look at the off-field performance, and there I would say Jesse Marsch would be absolutely perfect. Yeah, so he would get along well with the emotional part of the fans. He would also get along well with the media and with the sort of more laid back and tactical focused part of the fans. So I think therefore he would be a real good candidate, and he's not, you wouldn't have a situation like that we had with Tuchel and Ratzdale. I think they would get along quite well, but that's something that has to be considered with every coach. So yeah, that would be my final thought.
You have left out the most important part, which is obviously pandering to the US American market. But
sure.
I think we can leave it there. Thank you again, Felix, for coming on and shedding some light on Jesse Marsch for us. You can find Felix at Felix HA18 on Twitter and read his very insightful work at Süddeutsche Zeitung. Again, Felix, thank you for coming on, and back to the show.
Thanks for having me.
All right, Matthias, that were 15 minutes with Felix Haselsteiner. Thanks again for coming on and lending the expertise. But I also wanted to get your opinion. Felix obviously said that there is some risk involved of departing from Lucien Favre to bring on a coach that's not that experienced and has a different playing style and philosophy. So after I think it was Sportbild who broke the news or whatever it was, or just made up a rumor, one of the two, that Dortmund are putting an eye on Jesse Marsch. Do you think this is a potentially good step for Dortmund in their long-term strategizing?
Well, I think it's an intelligent thing to keep an eye on a younger coach that's coming through the Red Bull system, so to speak. Marco Rose isn't bad. For a few years, Roger Schmidt wasn't bad. Ralf Rangnick's not an idiot, tactically speaking. I'm not his biggest fan, but tactically speaking, he is one of the, grand poobahs of the German coaching revolution. I think we have to completely acknowledge that. And Jesse Marsch is also, he was obviously at New York Red Bulls and stuff like that. And the fact that he's willing to go and do the steps he's done in his development as a coach makes me also, as an American, really, really happy. I really deeply hope he never becomes U.S. men's national team coach, because that's just like, why? Have more ambition, please, Jesse, than that, because the issues. But he will, in my opinion, he's well, it's not really hard, but he's probably the best American coach to have left MLS. I think if he continues in this vein of form, yes, he's helped by the fact that he's at Red Bull Salzburg, which just dominates the Austrian league. So the wins can be a little bit misleading. But what I like about him, he's tactically astute. He's willing to learn. Listen to a great interview with him, I don't remember, it was a month or two ago on Extra Time Radio, the MLS podcast. And his willingness to try new things, learn things from the best people in the business when it comes to developing players and tactics and stuff like that. It fits the Dortmund way of thinking. That being said, I think switching out Lucien Favre for Jesse Marsch after this season would be a mistake. And Derek Ray actually tweeted something about Lucien Favre, should he be replaced or not, and it's basically the consensus is no, because Lucien Favre has made this Dortmund side overperform. Because remember, after the year of the two Peters, it sounds way too biblical, Dortmund is like, we're rebuilding. It could be a few seasons before we do anything special again. And they were right there with the title challenge and way ahead of schedule. So I think people are forgetting that. It's like, oh, we're so close, and totally overachieved last season under Lucien Favre, that the patience just goes away. And also it doesn't help that Favre is not Jürgen Klopp. He's not that firebrand guy. Jesse Marsch isn't really that either necessarily, but he's younger and he's different and he likes pressing football, so I guess that helps. So in my opinion, you do another season with Lucien Favre, unless for some reason Pochettino or Ten Hag says, sure, I'll come to Dortmund. But unless it's a guy like that, I just don't think it would be smart business from Dortmund to dump a proven coach like Lucien Favre for someone who's still a little bit unproven in Jesse Marsch. It's not like he's been Red Bull Salzburg head coach for 3 or 4 seasons. I mean, he replaced Marco Rose, who just recently came to Gladbach. So I think there's just still needs to be a little bit more water flowing down that river before you make that decision.
Yeah, I think I like the idea of a coach that has a pressing style. I think overall that brand obviously fits well to Borussia Dortmund, and we have talked a lot about the philosophy that Dortmund should take and what it is. But that being said, right now I'm actually very satisfied with the refined football of Lucien Favre and the balance that he has found. And obviously Dortmund have some exceptional players, and that obviously help Lucien Favre's success. But I also do think that Dortmund, after a very long time, have finally achieved some defensive stability as well. And I think that's worth something, and I like consistency on a coaching position. So while I like to entertain the thought of Jesse Marsch at the Dortmund sideline, and I can definitely see that in the future, considering that Lucien Favre was already 62 years old and maybe doesn't want to do this job forever, or just, being Lucien Favre just says, yeah, I'm out, guys, goodbye. Yeah, I can live with that, but I think for now it would actually just be smart for Dortmund to stick with Favre. But we are obviously not the people who decide that, so but just stay away with Niko Kovac, please. Jesus Christ. Anyway, Matthias, I think that's enough from us for now. So please tell our listeners how to get in touch with you and where to.
You can find me on Twitter at Matthias Zug.
Awesome. And you can find me at Stefan Butzko on Twitter as well. If you want to get in touch with all of us on Twitter or Facebook, please use at Yellowwallpod as well. And if you want to read our written content, go to theyellowwall.net, where you can also find the various means to subscribe to our podcast. And I'll ask listeners again to subscribe to our YouTube channel, which is, I think, The Yellow Wall, or if you just hit Yellowwallpod into the search bar on YouTube, you will 100% find it. So please do that. Other means are iTunes, SoundCloud, Stitcher, Spotify, Amazon and Google and all that stuff. And obviously you can also find our RSS feed on our website. And if you want to contribute financially, please go to patreon.com/theyellowwall. And that's all I have left to say. So as always, thank you for listening, and goodbye.